Chair recognizes Mr. Martinez Fischer to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is an amendment. Thank you for those who stayed with me on defeating the motion to table, and thank you to those who have since talked to me and will be open-minded on the debate. Some of the feedback I had about moving from a 3.5 to a 3.51 is they couldn't support anything that would give the appearance that you're upping the tax rate. And I respect that. I don't agree with that because the current law is 8%, and going from 3.5 to 3.51 is really not an increase under the current law. But what this amendment does is, if it's the desire of this body to keep taxes low, we have a de minimis exception in this bill. And for those of you who haven't seen it, it's on page 25. And it talks about it's a simple construction. And I understand that it makes sense. It's very simple. It just says you can either raise your taxes by 3.5%, or you can take up to $500,000 to go buy a fire truck. Well, for some counties, when they take $500,000 to buy a fire truck, they're going to up their tax rate to 63%, which is much higher than current law and much higher than the 3.5 effective rate that is being asked of the rest of us. And so this amendment just strikes the de minimis. If this is really good policy, if this is the direction of the state that we need to go in, more than 84 counties that would get a percentage that's higher than current law of 8%, they should live by the same means. And so I was joking with Drew Springer because he's my friend, but he's the very first one. He represents Motley County. And in 2017, Motley County levied $790,000 with their tax rate. If they take $500,000 under this bill, the effective rate for Motley County will be 63.25%. If you're King and you represent Briscoe County, you took $1.1 million in your tax levies in 2017. If you add the de minimis exception by not raising your taxes 3.5, you just take the de minimis exception, you now have an effective rate of 45.10. If you're James Frank in Baylor County, in 2017, you took $1.3 million in tax levies. You add the $500,000 de minimis exception. That sounds simple, and your tax rate is now 36.47. There's a chart on your desk that has it. I know that we always talk about the law of unintended consequences. This is not an unintended consequence. If the de minimis exception stays in this bill at $500,000, 84 counties will have an effective rate of 7.42% all the way up to 63.25. And if we're going to, Senate Bill 2 respectfully has been said over and over again that this does not lower taxes, and that is exactly right, but it shouldn't increase taxes either. And so for those of you that want to vote to not increase taxes, this is your amendment. I'm going to ask for a record vote on this. This is not conjecture. This is not spin. This is simple math. This is data from the Comptroller's Office. And this shows that 84 counties, which is a pretty good chunk of Texas, would be raising their tax rates if they take the de minimis exception, if they have the ability to. And so let's just save folks from themselves, and let's take out this exception. I ask you to support this amendment.
Mr. Burrows in opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we came up with this based on the testimony we heard that is really based on whether or not somebody needs to have an election over having a fire truck. Period, the end. The cost of the election could be a factor. We don't want that to play in there. We got rid of the $15 million carve-out. This language has been out there, and I, with respect, will move to table this amendment.
Chair recognizes Representative Martinez Fischer to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chairman Burrows. I respect the dialogue. We actually had a lot of dialogue about how this doesn't work to buy a fire truck when you're buying 50 of them for the big counties. This doesn't work when you're buying, 100 M4 semi-automatic rifles for your SWAT team and all the bullets that you need and the protective gear you need with it. We've heard a lot of testimony about that, but there is no de minimis exception for anybody who has a tax levy greater than $6 million. And so Chairman Burrows is indeed right. He did take out the $15 million carve-out, but he replaced it with another carve-out. And a carve-out replaced by another carve-out is still a carve-out. And maybe a little bit lower carve-out. But for those of you that want to go home saying that you took not a single vote to increase taxes, then I would vote to get rid of the de minimis exception, put everybody under the same tent at 3.5. If Motley County needs a fire truck, they still raised $800,000 in 2017. They can buy a fire truck with $800,000 and a 3.5 increase like everybody else. They can go out and sell a bond and have it in their debt rate and not have it go against the cap. They can do a lot of things like all the other cities that are going to have to do this, but they're going to be buying a lot of fire trucks. So if you're in Fort Bend County, I've heard from your county judge. I know the challenges. If you're in Tarrant County, I've talked to your county judge more than I've talked to my own county judge. And Judge Whitley will tell you in Tarrant County the needs of his county and how they do not survive under a 3.5. All I'm saying, if this is good policy for everybody else, we ought to make sure that these 84 counties live by it as well. Let's not vote to carve them out and then put our constituents that aren't in these 84 counties under a different standard. I'm going to ask for a record vote, and I ask that you please vote no on the motion to table.